Good finally Friday morning to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here on 13 WMAZ Plus for a look at your extended forecast. And of course, every Friday we like to preview some weekend events, and I'll have some event-specific forecasts for you, at least according to what the latest model guidance is. But first things first, we have one more new bit of information with Wednesday night storms that went all the way into early Thursday morning. We talked about it yesterday here on the stream. It was a total of 18 severe thunderstorm warnings over our central Georgia area. And of course, we had the one lone tornado warning that was in Upson County. Well, the National Weather Service, they sent a survey team out to Upson County yesterday. They did confirm actually an EF1 tornado in Upson County. It was near the Atwater area, which is going to kind of be a little bit north and northwest of downtown Thomaston, with winds of 95 miles per hour. And this was really just a textbook definition of what we call those brief spin-up tornadoes. You hear us outline those potential threats whenever we have a level risk in central Georgia. And even though tornado risk was not necessarily in the forecast, it was just kind of a weird phenomenon that caused some rotation very, very quickly. There was only one definitive radar scan where we really saw some rotation. And of course, that did sprout a tornado, and of course that funnel cloud was probably not on the ground too long. We're waiting for the official statement on it about how long the specific track was, over what roads that tornado did go over, but very brief and very spin up in nature. So that is just kind of showing you that given this time of year, you can have some weird phenomenon, and you can never rule anything out of the realm of possibility, because we weren't looking at a tornado threat, but of course one did end up sprouting just with the clash of an outflow boundary and an updraft, kind of that just perfect storm situation, quite literally, and that tornado confirmed in Upson County. At one point, one little nitpicky thing that was a very interesting factoid, over 6,000 lightning strikes were present over central Georgia at one time when we were taking a look at the radar. Now, of course, not all of those happening simultaneously across central Georgia. Those lightning strikes that we see pop up on the satellite and radar, they typically show up for about 10 to 15 minutes. And the closer you get to maybe 15 minutes ago when that lightning strike was, they get a lot grayer in color instead of that bright white color. But still, we had at least 6,000 lightning strikes recorded over central Georgia in about a 15-minute period at one point overnight. And that is a whole lot of lightning. That was the main story with these storms. It was virtually looking like the background on this graphic right here, where you're just seeing lightning illuminating the night sky every couple seconds. Now let's get into our future view. Let's talk about what we have in store for your Friday, for your Saturday, and for your Sunday. Friday afternoon, we go into the late afternoon hours, really getting close to evening commute time. Scattered showers bubbling up on future view, maybe the possibility of some heavier rainfall, a storm or two. It's really just looking like scattered rain over the next couple of days. Some of these clusters can get a little bit organized, have more widespread impacts, maybe a bit of a storm that's traversing over a county or two counties, maybe even three counties. But overall, it looks like mainly the rain is going to be of the scattered shower variety throughout this weekend, and then maybe a storm or two. And of course, can't rule out a strong or a severe storm this time of year. The theme that we are going to see is drying out overnight. Anything in the way of rain will lose all that surface heating, not going to have a lot to work with. So as we go into each and every morning, we should start out nice and dry, maybe a few clouds in the picture here and there. And then just past lunchtime, for your Friday, for your Saturday, for your Sunday, we will continue to see scattered showers bubble up off the heat of the day, very diurnally driven. So when we use that big fancy term, that basically just means driven by the heat of the day. So when temperatures are at their warmest, that contributes to a lot of rising motion. That's going to lift all the moisture that we have at the surface, because the humidity is going to stick around all weekend long as well. Now we go into 8 p.m. on Saturday. The trend I've seen with the last couple of future view runs is the rain maybe pops up a little bit earlier on Saturday, uses up all the fuel that it has, and we could clear out a little bit earlier into Saturday evening. That would be very beneficial because we have a couple of independence celebrations happening in central Georgia on Saturday evening, but we'll continue to see how the radar does pan out. Going into Sunday morning, another dry start to the day. It looks almost entirely clear on future view. That would be a gorgeous image of a sunrise to kickstart the last day of your weekend. Just after lunchtime, once again, greens, some yellows, some oranges, continuing to bubble up off the heat of the day. Very scattered in nature, pretty isolated in nature. So what that means is you could see some rain. The other end of the county might be dealing with some nice and sunny skies. So not everyone is going to see rain. It's very hit or miss in nature unless you get a good cluster or a good group of maybe some heavy rainfall that does kind of interact with each other, maybe interacting with some of those outflow boundaries this time of year, and it can have a little bit more of a widespread impact. But also a lot of these showers will try to continue into the nighttime hours each and every day. And just because Saturday, it looks like the activity does really die down a little bit earlier into the evening, doesn't mean that we could see it continue into those nighttime hours as well. Future View really struggles in terms of the timing with all of these kind of diurnally or convective shower and storm chances. So taking a look at your day one storm outlook. We have another level 1 out of 5 risk here in central Georgia for severe weather. The potential threat's still really going to be those gusty winds and the possibility of some hail within those cores of the most intense rainfall, and any gusty winds that you could see would be courtesy of what we call downdrafts. So about 40 to 60 mile per hour winds, a little less than what we were outlining as of the last couple of days. Wednesday night into Thursday morning, that range was about 50 to 70 miles per hour. That's why it constituted such a large threat. But also just continuing to see this level 1 risk over central Georgia for very pop-up shower and storm chances. Because we go to the day 2 outlook, well, central Georgia is not in any form of an outlook. And we in fact continue that trend all the way into your day 3 outlook, where yes, once again, central Georgia is left out of any sort of severe weather risk. But there's not any change with your forecast from Friday into Saturday into Sunday. It is the same story, different day, no real rhyme or reason to the rain chances. So still scratching my head at why we're getting these level 1 risks for the same forecast if Saturday and Sunday aren't included in that. But it doesn't change anything with your forecast altogether. Your weekend forecast, 90s. Or low 90s rather, I should say. We'll talk about maybe some 90s as we head into next week, a little bit of a spoiler alert. 30% chance of a shower, maybe even a storm. It could be in the form of a low-end thunderstorm, just your typical run-of-the-mill summertime thunderstorm, or it could be a little bit stronger. It could even be a severe thunderstorm warning, but we're only looking at maybe 1 or 2 of those each and every afternoon if they do occur. And this pattern continues all the way through the end of the weekend into Sunday. High temperatures and low temperatures are really virtually unchanging over the course of the next 3 days as we head into this last official weekend of June. But talking about those high temperatures, they're in the low 90s, so hovering right around where we should be this time of year. The average high is about 92 degrees. When you factor in the humidity, once again, take this with a grain of salt. We always hover just a little bit below what our actual dew points are. So our dew point temperature is expected to be somewhere in that dark green color, the very muggy color. And that's going to continue. No big weather systems coming through to maybe usher in some slightly drier air all throughout your weekend. This continues into the beginning of next week, but then Wednesday on into Thursday, we finally see a little bit of an indication that maybe some slightly drier air will get ushered into the forecast. We'll talk about that on the long-range models in just 1 second. So it's not going to be as hot as what we were dealing with earlier this week. We had heat advisory criteria, feels like numbers into the upper 100s, 110, even a couple isolated areas above feeling like 110 degrees. So our actual temperatures, that's what we're going to use for this too hot to trot graphic. It is a good reminder that we are still going to be hot, just not unbearably hot per se. So somewhere between 90 and 95 degrees for the weekend ahead. Concrete and asphalt temperatures are going to hover maybe around 130. Asphalt maybe up to about 145, 150 degrees in nature. Be sure you're taking care of your pets, but not just your pets. Make sure you're taking care of yourselves, keeping your body cool, hydrating frequently, and taking breaks in the shade or indoors in the AC whenever you need to. And of course, applying that sunscreen and making sure that you're reapplying it all throughout the day. So now let's talk about some things going on in central Georgia this weekend. Macon Bacon are in town Friday night against the Forest City Owls, I do believe. A chance of a storm is going to be present each afternoon in each evening. So that's why you will see the thunderstorm icons next to your temperatures at 5, 7, and 9 p.m. This doesn't mean it is for a guarantee going to be storming. In fact, you have a greater likelihood of it just being partly cloudy. But these are the max temperatures that we would see in terms of partly cloudy skies, not getting anything in the way of rain. Into the low 90s by the time you're arriving at Luther Williams Field. 7 p.m. for first pitch, not too bad. Upper 80s, feeling definitely into the 90s still. And then we go into 9 p.m., the closing innings of the game. Rain is still going to be possible even after the sun sets, but temperatures will continue to cool regardless if you get any rain or not. Talking about some Independence Day celebrations, the first of which will be in Centerville Friday night. They had a drone show last year, but I believe they're going back to having fireworks. You can stay up to date or go on our page online on 13wmaz.com for more information on that. So it's going to go on all day long over at the park by the Galleria Mall, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Once again, these are your temperatures. Maybe if you get some rain-cooled air, you actually will get a bump down in the temperatures, somewhere in the 80s, and maybe not necessarily feeling too much warmer. Of course, it is still going to be very muggy if you do receive a shower, but temperatures could still hover in the 90s until we get into about 7 to 8 p.m. The sun does begin its set for the day, and then temperatures will drop down into the 80s by the time you're wrapping up the night. Maybe still the chance of a shower or a storm, but temperatures will continue to cool into the low 80s or maybe even the upper 70s. Same graphic, but for a different celebration on Saturday down in Wheeler County. The Alamo Fire Department will be having a celebration that kicks off at 2 p.m. 84 degrees, 83 degrees, and 77. So you notice a bump down with these temperatures. That's giving you an idea that, number one, obviously Future View was having some of that rain pop up a little bit earlier in the day on Saturday and maybe clearing out a little bit earlier. So that's what I elected to go with for this graphic and giving you an example of what will happen if you do see a shower or a storm. Temperatures will hover in the low to mid 80s virtually all afternoon long, and then they will just continue to drop down into the 70s as the sun does set. But of course, if you don't get anything in the way of rain, these temperatures will be a little bit warmer into the low 90s and definitely feeling a little bit warmer. But the big Independence celebration that probably most of you look forward to each and every year, the Independence Day concert at McConnell Talbert Stadium down in Warner Robins. That is kicking off at 6 p.m. on Saturday. That's when the gates open at McConnell Talbert Stadium. And of course, the fireworks taking place later on as you go into the night. And you still have the chance of a shower or a storm. It doesn't matter where you live in Central Georgia. It's kind of that chance each and every day. A temperature of 84 degrees maybe as you're going into the evening hours. And if you get some rain-cooled air, of course, a touch or two warmer if you just have some partly cloudy skies. So a big weekend for 4th of July celebrations as we are just into the end of June. So obviously a little bit early, but 4th of July happening next Friday. Don't want to have many celebrations after the official holiday, so a lot of areas are knocking them out just before. If you're planning on going to the pool this weekend, number one, it is going to be a great weekend for it. Highs between 92 and 93 degrees, maybe not even that high in some areas. Of course, they will feel a little bit warmer, but when you're in the pool, you're not really worrying about those temperatures whatsoever. Afternoon and evening shower and storm chances. So of course, when thunder roars, head indoors. The pool is one of the last places that you want to be in terms of lightning being in the near vicinity. And the good news is if you see anything in the way of rain or in the way of a storm, it is going to be fairly short-lived. And a steady breeze out of the west, about 5 to 10 miles per hour. If you catch a storm, then of course some gustier winds, 15 plus miles per hour will be possible. And sunset this weekend happening at 8:46 p.m. So a little bit earlier than last weekend, but we have hit that longest day of the year so far. So we will continue to watch that sunset get a little bit earlier. Grillcast, obviously going into the 4th of July, I have to give you a grillcast. Yellow spatulas each and every afternoon and evening. Just kind of pay attention to what's going on outside. You hear things a little bit loud in the distance, some dark clouds approaching. Probably not the best time to get the idea to fire up the grill, but if it's nice and sunny outside, you are looking good to go, and it's a better chance that you will have of staying dry as opposed to receiving any rainfall this weekend. And make sure that you do have the umbrella and the rain jacket handy no matter where you go as you venture out the door, because obviously Mother Nature just has a funny way of playing tricks on you and kind of knows whenever you don't have that rain gear handy, and it will find a way in order to dump a shower or even a storm on you. But we haven't talked about some rainfall recently. So after a couple of days of maybe even some severe weather, some strong weather, we've added a couple more days to the tally of some rainfall. We were actually hovering in the middle of this very wet category last time I remember showing this graphic. We saw a steady decline. We went a couple days without rain chances, and even this one day right here, only recording 5/100ths of an inch at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. But back-to-back days on the 25th and the 26th where we recorded about 3/4 of an inch of rain. So that bounces back up into the very wet category from the wet category and brings our total to 6.5 inches of rain so far in the month of June. And this doesn't seem too drastic when you compare it to this record back in 2013, 12.25 of an inch of rain. but the average June rainfall is about 3¾ of an inch of rain, really close to 4 inches of rain. Still have a couple more days to go until the official end of June, and we're definitely going to finish the month above average. So in terms of the entire year of 2025, January and February were those dry months that we had. Not entirely too much of a cushion right here to bounce back from those totals, March and April, but May we definitely saw above average amounts of rainfall, hovering nearly 3½ inches above the average for the month of May, and we're hovering nearly 3 inches above average for the month of June so far. So this puts our totals still nearly 4 inches above average. That's a good cushion to hopefully go into a dry spell with. But as we're in the summertime months, we're still going to have these rain chances virtually each and every day. So of course, probably not getting a dry spell anytime soon, but say we go into the fall and we hit a stretch like we did last year where we went the entire month of October without recording even a drop of rain, this would be a good cushion to have. And even after going a time spell of about 4 weeks without recording anything in the way of rain, that number would only just dip a little bit below average. So these are as of June 26. We still have more rain chances in the forecast throughout this weekend, and that will continue into the beginning of next week, that last official day of June on Monday. So we'll see how we end up with the month of June and see where we are at the halfway point of 2025 in terms of those rainfall chances. But you probably could have guessed it, the drought monitor, the entire state, in fact, many of our neighboring states too, because they've been getting their fair share of rain from a lot of the systems that have come through central Georgia as well. No one is in anywhere near drought conditions. So everyone is looking good. Lots of luscious green grass out there. None of that brown and crunchy grass that you get when typically conditions are pretty dry, and your backyard and your lawn does need a little bit of hydration. This drought monitor was as of this past Tuesday, June 24th. We get the drought monitor data every Tuesday. They release it out every Thursday. And if we do hit a very dry spell, then we'll continue to keep you updated on this, but it hasn't been something that we've spent too much time on as of recently. Now let's go long range. Let's go into that second half of the 7-day forecast where we can continue to see rain chances all over the south and the southeast going into Monday afternoon and evening. That's going to still be the timing of these rain chances because they're going to operate off the heat of the day. Temperatures are still going to be warm next week. But the one takeaway with the long range models has been a little bit more widespread are the rain chances heading into next week. We might get a little bit of a shift in flow. It could start coming in from the south and the southwest, which would usher some Gulf moisture all across central Georgia. And if we have any upper level features that kind of act as an axis of lift, then that of course would enhance the precipitation chances, maybe even the storm chances in nature. But you are seeing maybe just a little bit of organization. It did kind of look like a front on that last image for Tuesday at 6 p.m. Maybe a front tries to push a little bit farther south on Wednesday. Not going to be one of those fast moving fronts that has a clean sweeping motion through central Georgia. But then we get into Thursday, you can see those rain chances in these shades of green, these shades of blue continue to push farther and farther and farther down towards the south and the southeast. So a slow moving frontal boundary looks to be what's in the near future, and we're getting a glimpse of that as we head into the end of next week. Friday at 3 p.m., that's 4th of July next weekend, and it does look like maybe we could see most of the rain chances down to the south, the southeast of us, off in the Atlantic Ocean, off in the Gulf. That would be very beneficial, but of course, as you know, a forecast about 7 days out is never really too accurate. That's why we only show you the 7-day forecast, because we're not confident whatsoever in anything that we can predict past that. Some people will show you 10-day forecasts, but obviously the last 3 days of that are really just anyone's guess. But let's talk about some of the temperatures as we head into next week. Still in the low 90s, but hey, how about this? Wednesday, we could maybe even dip into the upper 80s. These numbers aren't going to virtually feel any different because, of course, the humidity will still make them feel like the 90s. But it would just be nice to maybe get some temperatures below average as we roll into July, which is typically one of our warmest months that we have here in central Georgia, speaking from past personal experience. And, of course, many of you already know that. Morning lows, I went with a quartet of 71s as we start out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. All you need to know is the morning lows are virtually going to be unchanging each and every day. The only time we get some fluctuation on those is maybe when you get a little bit of cooler air inserted from a cold front, but obviously we call them cool fronts this time of year because that doesn't happen too much, or you have more cloud cover in the forecast during the overnight hours. That could keep the temperatures a little bit above average, but pretty much a similar start to each and every morning, where you will notice the humidity because the dew point temperatures are going to be matching those numbers. And the dew point temperatures, they never get over the actual temperatures. So now let's go into July 4th weekend and then just a little bit past July 4th weekend. We'll talk about our 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. So you see the range, July 4th through the 10th, above normal probability down here in the south and the southeast along the Gulf Coast of seeing some above normal temperatures, So by the time we get into this period of July, I imagine the average high probably going to be around 93, maybe even bumped up to 94 degrees. So if we have a pretty good chance of maybe being above normal, then that would mean some high temperatures back into the mid 90s, could even be in the upper 90s. And it looks like central Georgia is kind of a divided area, but more areas are in this darker shade of some orange as opposed to the lighter shade up in the northern half of the state. And that puts us at least 2 or maybe even 3 boxes over to the right. Again, the farther right that you go on the scale, that means the greater likelihood you have of having some above average temperatures. But now we'll do the same thing for the precipitation outlook. Same date range, July 4th through the 10th. And it does look like we're 1 box over from near normal. So a little bit of a chance of being above normal in terms of the rainfall over this 6-day period into the extended forecast. But this is just giving you a vague idea right now. It looks like we're probably just going to continue with the typical summertime forecast, but we could even have some days that do trend just a little bit drier. So let's go to your looking ahead graphic. Obviously, 4th of July is the one thing that I'm sure many of you, like myself, are looking forward to going out of town, going to the lake, going to the beach, having some fun with friends and family. So of course, July 4th will happen next Friday, and then we'll get into that holiday weekend. After that, we don't have much going on in the month of July. I've been looking and I've been trying to brainstorm. I don't really think I see anything that's really occurring weather-wise or big holiday-wise, anything that's going to impact you. You get into July, mainly many of you know it for 4th of July celebrations, and then obviously kind of that last month that you do have of summer break. But maybe not even an entire month of celebrating that last month of summer, because yes, back to school kicks off on July 30th. We've done our due diligence. We've asked all the schools when they will be starting back. Houston County and Peach County starting back on July 30th, which seems absolutely criminal. But as a former Houston County student myself, I've definitely gone back to school at the very last day of July or the last couple of days of July. Everyone else will follow subsequently, getting into July 31st, and then of course turning the calendar to August on August 1st. So I do believe July 30th is a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Obviously a lot of their school districts like to start back in the middle of the week, just give the students like a day or 2 schoolwork week to kind of just get them back acclimated to school and then hit the ground running for a full week of school after that weekend. But then we go into Labor Day, and that will be happening actually on the first day of September right there. I was thinking I messed up the date right there and was supposed to put an 8, but yes, Labor Day will be happening on the first day of September, so kind of perfect timing right there. And of course, many of you know that the last couple of days of August before that on Labor Day weekend, that will be the start of college football, so I'm very excited about that, creeping closer and closer to football season. And then something meteorological that I did want to put on here, the peak of hurricane season happening not too far after Labor Day. That will occur on September 10th. And that means the frequency of tropical systems is going to be at its peak. We typically don't see an uptick in tropical activity until we get into late July into August, more so August. And then August, September, and October are typically pretty active months for the Atlantic hurricane season. So that's something I want to throw on your radar as well, because we'll go into the next 2 months and start talking about the tropics just a little bit more each and every day. But not holding the tropics talk off until then, let's go ahead and take a look at your tropics outlook as of the 8 a.m. update this past Friday. Taking a look at the Atlantic Ocean as a whole right now, it is still very quiet, maybe a cluster of some thunderstorms right there in between Bermuda and Puerto Rico. But what I want you to notice is a lot of this very faint brown color. That's your Saharan dust that's continuing to blow off the coast of Africa. And we talk about the Saharan dust because it does inhibit tropical activity forming off the west coast of Africa. So as long as that stays present, it's very likely to remain pretty quiet in the Atlantic Ocean. But that dust is not visible everywhere on your satellite imagery. Take a look at this right here. We go down to the Gulf and then we go down into the Caribbean. And of course, we do have an area of potential development down here, kind of similar to where Hurricane Helene did develop last year. But obviously, this cluster or maybe burst of convection right here in the Caribbean is expected to traverse over the Yucatan Peninsula, areas like Belize, and I do believe that is Guatemala right over there to the west, and eventually move into the southern Gulf right here just off the eastern coast of Mexico. But slim chances of development right now, 10% over the next 2 days of the course of this weekend, and then 20% chance of developing over the next week. We'll continue to keep a close eye on it because it is pretty close to home, obviously not too far away from central Georgia, but there's nothing that's pointing to any signs of this cluster organizing and then maybe taking a little bit of a U-turn and coming back up into the southeast United States. But if this is to form, it would be our B-name storm. In fact, this past week, we did get Tropical Storm Andrea. Andrea formed in the northern Atlantic Ocean, and it dissipated in probably about 12 hours time. So it didn't have a lot to work with up there in the northern Atlantic Ocean. A lot of us in the meteorological community still kind of scratching our heads at why that system did even get a name or it even warranted anything, because it didn't impact any land masses and it only gained organization into a tropical storm of about 45-mile-per-hour winds. So if this system that we were talking about with the potential for developing, that does form, we would be at the B letter, and the next name on the list is Barry. Then we get into C, D, E, F, G, obviously all of the letters of the alphabet, except for a select few once you get towards the end. Obviously, you don't see a Z on here, you don't see an X on here. There's only a select few names that do start with that letter, but 20 letter names that we do have for the 2025 hurricane season. I do believe, actually 21 it is. I believe these are rows or columns, excuse me, of 7. So just doing a little brainstorming right there. But B is going to be the next letter name storm. That's the most important thing that I wanted to hint at. But it's a good time to revisit our outlook for the 2025 hurricane season. On average, you typically see about 14 named storms, of which 7 can become hurricanes, and then maybe 3 of them classify as Category 3 or higher hurricanes, and that is major criteria. Well, the Pacific Ocean, they've already had about 5 named storms, so they're doing a good job of reaching their averages. And they've already, in fact, had a major hurricane. So already 1 out of those 3 maybe, but these are the Atlantic Basin averages as opposed to the Pacific. We'd have to do some more digging with that. But us here in the Atlantic, we've only had 1 named storm, so only 1 out of the 14 that we typically see on average. But now going into the forecast, what we're expecting this year, and we have a lack of El Nino or La Nina, I believe. I've been doing too much tropics research, as you can tell, so I'm going to have to get back on the train of that. But 17 named storms is what's forecasted by Colorado State, who typically has a pretty good track record, 9 of which could be hurricanes, and then 4 major hurricanes. So all of those numbers do fall above average. And then NOAA does give us a pretty wide range in terms of what their forecast is. That's why Colorado State's a lot better. They nailed down the specific number. This range of NOAA, of course, the lower end of each of these ranges does fall below average of all these, except for major hurricanes, which it does match at 3. But then the upper end of this range does go well above average, even above the numbers forecasted by Colorado State right there. So a pretty vague idea of what we can expect in the 2025 hurricane season, but still it is forecasted to be above average. And the way it's going right now, it doesn't look like we'll hit those numbers, which would be a good thing. But like I said, we typically don't see that much tropical activity this time of year. We see the frequency increase as we go into August, September, and October. So that's why you haven't heard us talk about the tropics very much whatsoever. We'll continue to keep an eye on that potential area of development over in the Western Caribbean that could traverse down into the Gulf right off the coast of Yucatan and Cancun and Belize, all of those Central American countries, because that's getting pretty close to home. And obviously, if we are to see a shift in the path, which is definitely not necessarily out of the normal whatsoever. We saw Hurricane Milton form in the Western Gulf last year, and it did traverse eastward, kind of the opposite of direction that hurricanes usually go. They normally go east to west. So we'll keep a close eye on that as we go throughout the weekend and into next week. So that's going to do it for a look at your extended forecast for the weekend. I hope you all have a safe weekend. Make sure you have some fun, but make sure you're taking care of yourselves, applying that sunscreen, hydrating very frequently, and making sure that you are taking frequent breaks indoors and in the shade to avoid any of those heat illnesses. Make sure you're being safe, especially with things like fireworks, and keeping an eye out on the latest forecast. And of course, when thunder roars go indoors, it's the summertime, so those thunderstorms will happen more frequently. Have a fantastic weekend.